Verbally and emotionally abusive marriage, when is enough? How long do you keep trying to work things out? With small children that are quickly starting to pick up on things, worried, and she's worried about her girls growing up with a warped view of how a man treats his wife, or women in general. Is there ever a circumstance where it's biblically okay to leave? Any advice on communicating and working on things with someone who is unwilling to discuss personal matters with anyone other than his spouse? In other words, the husband apparently doesn't want to go to a counselor or even a mentor couple or whatever. So this is a tough thing.
It is, and just to tell you, a question like that deserves a bigger answer than we're in a position to give because of other questions we need to respond to. Would say, certainly you take this before the Lord, but not only before the Lord. You take it to friends, you take it to counselors, you take it to your pastor, you get whatever help you can get. Most importantly, the one thing you should not do is nothing. If you think, oh, this will just hopefully take care of itself, the vast majority of times that simply is not going to happen. It's not going to take care of itself. There needs to be intervention of some sort. You can't just sit around and wait for him to become willing to change someday. In minor areas, yes, you wait patiently, encourage. Well, this is not a minor area. If there's an abusive, verbally and emotionally abusive marriage, certainly if there's a physically abusive one, but even the verbally abusive end of things, there has to be intervention. Proverbs 19:19 says, a hot-tempered man must pay the penalty. If you rescue him, you will have to do it again. Don't become the person who is always defending, excusing, rescuing. Yes, be committed to making this marriage work, but understand that when abuse is involved, there has to be life and heart transformation. He can get help. He must be willing to get help. Is there a time where it's appropriate to leave? I'd say there is. For protection of a woman and the children, there is a time, but I would leave only with a view toward moving toward the help that he needs to get and you need to get, with the goal of being reconciled in the marriage moving forward. Want me to read this? When your husband has been deeply hurt and can't seem to get over it, how can I, as his wife, help him? Want me to? Okay. Okay.
I do want to throw one thing out. You know how, I don't know if any of you guys have seen that incredible video about the girl that has the nail in her head. and she's telling her husband, you know, I just have these headaches and I don't know what to do. And her husband is just sitting there saying, well, you have a nail in your head. All you have to do is take it out. And the whole idea is that the husband is trying to fix it, and all she wanted to do was listen and have him listen and say, oh, I hear your pain. You really are in a hard way. And you can relate to that. We love that. I'm here to say that I think there's more truth to that in men than you know. Mm-hmm. And I think that someone who has a hurting husband, I just know from experience that instead of me interrupting him and saying, okay, I can see that, but that guy that said that hurtful thing to you, he's wrong, it's stupid, you know you're not really that way, no one really thinks that way about you. No. I don't interrupt him, let him talk, let him finish. And the first thing that you need to do is nod and say, oh my gosh, that is amazing. I cannot imagine how that must make you feel. And I think for Randy and I, one of the most bonding things in our marriage is for us to be on the same side of something. Mm-hmm. And it's, some people might think that it might be contributing to him moping about it or whatever, but I really don't believe that. I think that it is, as his wife, if I can just, and I've really tried, I don't think I was that good about it in the past, but it's one thing that I've really tried to do more currently is just saying, not necessarily contributing to the source, but jumping into that hurting boat with him and putting my arm around him, either physically or or figuratively, and saying, "Wow, that is tough."
And I would also say, and it's part of the balance of that, I very much agree with what Nanci just said, but I would also say we need to help each other as spouses. And one of the ways that we need to do that is to say, you know what? We live in a world that's under the curse. It's going to be delivered from the curse someday, but right now it's under the curse. Don't be surprised, we're told in 1 Peter, don't be surprised at the fiery ordeal you are going through as if something strange were happening to you. It's not strange. That happens in this world. So when somebody has hurts and disappointments, you don't minimize, you don't start with what I'm saying. You start with what Nanci's saying. But there is a time where somebody just moves forward and they don't move forward. They're incapacitated in life because of all the hurts and the people at work that don't get them and don't understand them and are always picking on them. And I think there's a time to just say, you know what? You just have to move on, focus on the Lord, make the best of things, and realize He's the audience of one. He's the one that you need to please. And realize that life is going to dish out blows to all of us. And I think what we do sometimes is we get totally unrealistic and we expect life to go smoothly. And if you expect life to go smoothly, you will be a very discouraged, disappointed person. But when you're realistic and you know that tough things are going to happen, and you have a smooth day where not much that was tough happened, you're pleasantly surprised and you go, wow, thanks, Lord, this is great. But if you expect it always to go your way and it doesn't, you're going to be perpetually disappointed. Somebody asked the question, what would you recommend for younger kids, like 5 years old, on heaven? Two of the books that are available there in the back, one's called Wait Until Then, and I love that. So good. Wow. Okay. And then another one called Tell Me About Heaven.
No.
Hey! Okay. That's right. Clearly, most of you have read it and loved it. Anyway, so those books are for younger kids. So our book, Heaven for Kids, yes. When I sleep, I usually remember the titles of my book. When I've been sleep deprived, it's difficult. So Heaven for Kids is for kids 8 to 12. These are for younger kids. And you can sit down and read it with them, and those might be helpful.
Well, and also just talking to them. Educate yourself on what heaven really is like, and then talk to them about it. And, I mentioned my post bucket list. You could start your post bucket list, don't call it that, kids wouldn't understand it, but just what are you looking forward to when you get to heaven or to the new earth, which is, by the way, very physical. And you can talk to them about what do you want to do? We saw a YouTube somebody sent us the other day about a lab that was jumping off of a boat in Hawaii somewhere and started swimming with all these dolphins. And this woman jumped in and she was swimming with her lab and these dolphins. And I went, that's what started my post bucket list right there.
Is that great?
I want to do that more than anything in the world. And to be able to talk to your kids about how much fun, I do that with my grandkids. I talk to them about, won't it be fun to be able to, play football with Reggie White in heaven, Mm-hmm. And that means a lot to them. May not mean a lot to you guys, but it means a lot to them.
Talk about entering into your grandkids' world and what they love. Nanci's a natural because she loves football anyway, but it's a great thing. Somebody says, I'm looking forward to heaven personally, but my excitement is overshadowed by worry for my unbelieving husband and 2-year-old daughter. How do I find peace without knowing their eternal destination? And that's another one of those questions that deserves a lot of attention, but I guess I would just say, you pray for your unbelieving husband, you give him over to the Lord, and you certainly look for opportunities with him. And I would say, 1 Peter talks about the unbelieving husband being one without a word by the godly behavior of his wife. And when it says without a word, it doesn't mean a word can never be said, but don't rely so much on words that you forget to back it up with the kind of attractive life that loves Jesus, is happy in Jesus, where you're a better person because of Jesus and you're a better wife because of Jesus, and you don't nag more, you nag less because of Jesus, and you don't nag him to become a Christian and go to church, because that's not what's going to draw him yet. At the same time, you look for the strategic opportunities to speak up and invite him to things and reach out to.
It's a lot like what we were talking about before. You can interrupt your husband. No.
Yeah.
The whole pursue thing. Any loved one in your family, that doesn't know the Lord, and we all have those. Are we the fragrance of Christ? Are we something that would make them want to pursue Christianity, pursue the Lord that you follow?
And as far as the 2-year-old daughter is concerned, that's a matter that is more in your hands. It's not ultimately in your hands. We don't save other people. Mm-hmm. But certainly a child who's entrusted to your care and your upbringing, you have a complete liberty to say what you may have a more limited liberty to say with your husband. And that is, talk about God and show through your life that you love God more than anybody. And you can tell your kids, you know what? I love you more than anybody that exists anywhere except maybe God and your daddy, or you and your daddy are in a tie, if there's no other siblings, after God. But I love God more than anyone else. And that makes it real. Jesus is my best friend. And when we were raising our kids, we wanted them to know God is most important to us. And you know what? If God is most important to you, you will be a far better father. You will be a far better husband. Here's one of the things to avoid, and that this kind of connects with this and another question that we have here, is do not put upon any other person the responsibility of being for you what only God can be. Yes. Do not look to your husband to meet your deepest needs. It will never happen, number one, and number two, even if it could, it shouldn't, because God is number one. He's the primary. He should meet your deepest needs. Don't put that burden on your husband or your children to always be the ones who need to make the wife or make their mommy happy. That's in Jesus. And take that load off of their shoulders. Otherwise, in the name of love, you will be loving them to death. And you'll be thinking, I'm just loving them. Don't you know, the mom who is always explaining, I only did it out of love. That was my only motive. And it becomes kind of the martyr, the sacrificial. I do all these things for you. And it's kind of like, back off, Mom. Let me have my own life. Love me, yes, but don't smother me. And then another one that says, I'm married to an unbeliever. Help.
Okay, so the first thing that I think of with that question is, and part of I think that question was help. How do I attract him to God, kind of thing, but also how do I handle my life? And the short but very profound answer is, you have got to get to know God better. When you immerse yourself in His Word and therefore know who your God is, I know it sounds simplistic, but it is totally a paradigm shift in anyone's life. And I guarantee you, the more you get to know God, the more you realize how very attractive he is. And the more that you get to know him, and the more that your life becomes attached to him, and the more that you can live because you're created in his image, you're his child, and if you can reflect him to your unbelieving husband, it becomes I'm here to tell you, it becomes a lot more natural than you think it would, because God is a God who is there for us. He is there for your husband. He is there for mankind. He is gracious. He's loving. He's merciful. And the more you know him, the more you can reflect him in a way that will become irresistible to those around you. And so not only will it just naturally roll off you, but also the other part of knowing your God is knowing what he wants you to do. And it's just a formula of reading the Word, getting to know who God is, and then a lot of times, because you know that he's sovereign, or you know that he is loving, or you know that he is holy, there are a lot of questions that get answered for you because you have learned this about God.
Sometimes just reaching out to a Christian man, somebody you know at church, maybe he's in your growth group, the husband of somebody that you know at church, or maybe in your group here, or whatever, to say, would you take an interest in my husband? Would you just spend some time with him and invite him to something? Can we get together as couples? And sometimes that will be effective. Meanwhile, as Nanci said, becoming the person and trusting God. Speaking of that, the great book by Jerry Bridges, Trusting God, a book on God's sovereignty and trusting God to do his work. You know, we can't save another person. Only God can save them. But you pray for and you try to follow Jesus as best you can, and realize that certain things are outside of your control. But I would say don't give up hope. I've seen so many people. My dad, who we prayed for many years, who came to faith in Christ at 85 years old, and you say, are you telling me my husband may be 85? No, I'm just saying God can do wonderful miracles. We're actually out of the questions that have been given to us, but let me throw one in, and then if anybody else has any, you can ask them. And that is that I know this is always on the minds of women. My husband has a pornography problem. What can I do? And I would say this is another one of those problems where the answer is not to do nothing. And I think a lot of women just sort of ignore it or hope that it's going to take care of itself, and it just won't take care of itself. And there needs to be some honest, humble conversation to say, this is one thing that cannot be acceptable in our home. The computer you can't be looking at this, you can't, because it's destroying our relationship, and it's going to hurt our children, our little boys, our little girls. Don't think kids don't pick up on this stuff, or don't walk into a room and see the image and all of this. It needs to be dealt with. Counseling, celebrate recovery, another man who has had victory in this area that intervenes and sits down and talks with him. I would say do not ignore it. Get help. Go to your husband about it. If there isn't dramatic change at that point, tell him, I've got to go. I've got to go to our pastor. I've got to go to the men's leader. I've got to go to one of your friends that loves Jesus. Something has to be done in this area. That's not an easy route, but it's something that needs to be done. Other questions? And then when we're out of time, maybe it's now, I don't know, but just stop us, because I don't know.
It's 11.
Okay. Any questions? I don't know. These were the only questions we were given. If somebody else wrote something down, it didn't get to us, so feel free to ask. Yes?
Back to the teaching sexuality, what about little ones and little hands
I'm kind of guessing at what. Do you want to respond to that?
Huh?
Touching themselves.
Touching themselves or others? Or both? Okay.
Themselves, yes. Right. Well, I think if it's a girl, the best conversation comes from mom. If it's a boy, the best conversation comes from dad. If dad's not around and there's an uncle or a grandfather who's trusted and able to handle that, then I think it's just a very honest and direct say, hey, there's habits. And you don't want to get into this habit. And so just encouraging that not to happen. When it's older and it's to the point that it actually involves, say, masturbation, then it's something that needs to be dealt with, I would say, with care, with understanding. This is natural, but not all things which are natural are healthy. So let's try to kind of break this habit, and let's certainly deal with the issue of what thoughts are in our mind. Jesus said our thoughts are important, and deal with it from there. Any of the books, probably the Larimore book that I mentioned earlier, and any book that relates to teen sexuality, will probably deal with the masturbation issue. But I think honest, open communication, the right way, the right time, but one that has your arm around, and you're not a bad, evil person, and sex is not a bad, evil thing.
Right.
God created this. But it's something that needs to be carefully managed, and God has reserved it for the marriage relationship. And let's talk about this in open ways. Any other questions? Want me to read it? Okay. What are some fun things that you do as a couple when the budget is really tight? What have you done? What are fun things that we do?
Okay, the first thing about tight budget, again, when we were in your stage, was we didn't hire babysitters. We had friends. So you need to have friends that you can switch off with. And nowadays, babysitting is ridiculously expensive. And
Not that you shouldn't have babysitters, but we're talking about if you literally can't afford.
Yes.
Okay.
Or grandmas and grandpas. I'm here to tell you, we love it. So let them do that. And so that's one thing. And what we used to do was we had in-town vacations where instead of going to Seattle or going to Sun River or something like that, we'd kids would go to Halavka's or Kathy's or somebody for the weekend, and we would stay home, but we would go out to the movies, but we would go out like at the 3 o'clock showing instead of the 7 o'clock showing, so it would be cheaper. And we would go out to eat, but we wouldn't have to go to Ruth's Chris. We could go to Taco Bell or whatever we wanted. But you can save so much money by not having to go to a hotel. Actually, with the kids are gone, why do you have to go to a hotel? Unless you want a swimming pool or something, and we did that a lot.
And we can go, you can have fun doing so many things. We used to just walk around malls and not buy. I mean, just Clackamas Town Center or whatever, back in our day, I guess it was Eastport Plaza or something like that. No, Lloyd Center, but walk around and just, and eat at an inexpensive place. We used to do that a lot. There was back in the old days, Pietro's Pizza, which was one of our favorite places. Or, we'd go to a place that just where we'd get a good meal that isn't expensive. One of the places that we still like today is Truffle Hunter in Gresham. And there's just lots of places where you can get a reasonably inexpensive meal. Downtown Gresham has several, good places we like to sit. It's close.
Or go downtown Portland. Why go to Seattle and hang out? You probably haven't been to Portland that much, so go downtown Portland, take the Max or drive and walk around, and it's,
Ride bikes, go out on an adventure together, pack a lunch and ride bikes together and go someplace. The Springwater Corridor Trail, how many of you, even know what I'm talking about? And become familiar with that trail. It's wonderful. And just the stuff you can do together very inexpensively. Play tennis, some of the things that don't really cost much money or sometimes any money to do. Another question. How do you keep the marriage fun after the 10-year mark? Let's see, remembering back to the 10-year mark. No. What would you say? How do you keep the marriage fun?
I know this sounds like a rut, but at 10 years, you probably have kids. And so, again, I don't know where Angela is, but I hope she isn't getting a complex here, but I really love having my kids around.
We loved our kids and still do.
And again, if you're talking about fun in the marriage, fun in the family means you find fun things that the whole family likes to do.
The whole family does.
And you do it, and it's a whole lot of fun. But if what you do as a family is you take the kids to soccer and you sit and watch your soccer game, and you take the kids to basketball and you watch the basketball game, and then you take your kids to ballet and all this kind of thing, if everything revolves around them, you can have a lot of fun with that. But if you want my answer, again, it's let them play with their friends and go do what you guys feel like doing. And so one of the things that I did, and it was probably just about 10 years, was I saved up some money. What I did was we had a little change jar, and you'd be surprised nowadays how you can get. I remember one time I got $40 out of a change thing. But anyway. And I cashed that in because we weren't rolling in money back then. And I found a place in Seattle where I could, if you stayed one night, you get the second night free. So it was half price, and we drove, but Randy didn't know about it, and so I had a bunch of people make appointments.
Once we got to Seattle, I knew, but
no, yeah.
Before.
I had a bunch of people make fake appointments. Can you counsel me, Randy? Can we meet together and all this stuff for 2 days so that his schedule was full?
People were actually inventing problems.
Yeah, they were. And so one day he came out and he thought he was going to spend this day doing it. I said, no. I said, I don't know whether I think I packed for you, but anyway.
Yeah.
And so I had packed
great.
for him, and I said, we're going someplace. And actually, I didn't even tell you where we were going.
Right.
And he had to start guessing. And he said, well, I guess it's not Sun River because we're going north, so, all this stuff. And it was a lot of fun because it was a surprise, and he loved it. Now, if your husband doesn't like surprises, that's not fun. But, there's something about the surprise, and honestly, I'm here to tell you, we didn't have very much money then, but we drove up there, we stayed half price. I don't know that we did anything but walk around Seattle.
It was just great.
And we ate out at cheap places.
And I think the initiative, and this is what I would say, sometimes women think, well, it really should be my husband who takes the initiative on these things. Well, maybe it should be, but hey, don't hold your breath, all right? Take the initiative yourself, and then let your husband see how fun this is, and how fun it is to be with you, and the fact that you even put thought into this. That was very touching to me, and I just went, I thought I had heavy-duty counseling appointments all day, today and tomorrow, and instead I'm with my wife, who I love with all my heart, is my best friend. Wow, that trade-off was a real easy one, and it was great, and it was wonderful. The surprise was terrific. So also just the taking of the initiative on your part inspires your husband to take initiative. But don't quietly sit back and let the months and years go by without having time to renew your relationship and your romance. We had a weekly date night that we, for years, stuck with. Now we don't have to have a date night because we have lots of date nights. We don't have to put them on the calendar. We just say, hey, it's been a while. It's been maybe 3 days since we've been out to dinner, so let's go out. But back then it was like, get it on the calendar. So maybe it's Thursday nights. For us, for a while, it was Thursday nights. And that's your night. And it's like, we're going to go like to the Hood Theater where it's cheap and watch this movie that was a major movie 2 months ago and now is a minor movie apparently, but it's just as fun to see it now as it was then. Do these things, and these things are fun.